Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Mann, Hot Topics Chairman this year, and I want to thank you all for coming. I hope you find our presentation very informative. This was inspired by feedback from our area superintendents who met with the ODC team this summer to provide insight into topics and issues to help advocate for to our community. As Ariane said, the speakers will speak for about 30 minutes, and then we will have we allot about 15 to 20 minutes afterwards for questions. Um, Again, please put them in the chat, and I will read them off um, after the speakers have finished. And now I would like to introduce our speakers, Jeanne Smith and Lucy Bond.
Hi, good evening. We're so happy to be here. Thank you for the time that you're taking to listen to us speak about this very important issue. Okay, we can go to the next slide. All right, thank you. These are troubling times for public schools. They are struggling because of underfunding and uncertainty, and they need support from all of us. They need our advocacy to survive and to strive. So we are excited or pleased that we can discuss the North Carolina public education issues that are going on in our state right now. Thank you. All right, next slide. As we review the agenda, please know that we are not experts and that no matter how much we research this information, it is changing as we speak. That's what we found out. We will do our best to bring as much awareness as we can to this important topic of public school education. The agenda includes the League of Women Voters North Carolina's position on public education and how public schools are good for our communities. We will address government roles and responsibilities, which include state, local, and federal government. We will discuss the underfunding of public education and then your role as a public school advocate and voter, because public education is not a spectator sport, as we saw in that very first slide. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. A strong public education system for all North Carolina children is the foundation for informed and productive citizens and voters. We all know that. And this statement also supports the League of Women Voters' position in creating a more just, equitable, and inclusive democracy. In May of 2025, at our League of Women Voters North Carolina convention, public education was chosen as an issue of emphasis for the next 2 years. And the statement is to enhance and protect all levels of funding for public schools, including through associated tax policy, provide civics education, and oppose shifting dollars to vouchers for private schools. Okay. The right of public education is stated in the North Carolina Constitution, not so much in our U.S. Constitution, but it is in our North Carolina Constitution, and it is supported by laws. Article 1 is the Declaration of Rights. The people have a right to the privilege of education, and it is the duty of the state to guard and maintain that right. And then again in Article 9, a general and uniform system of free public schools shall be provided throughout the state, wherein equal opportunities shall be provided for all students. Okay. Public schools do the public good. That was sort of a chant that, or a statement that we've heard many times when we were beginning our public school committee. Around 84% of North Carolina's children attend public schools, and we must make that investment to secure their futures and the future of our state. So it is a good investment. Public schools give students opportunities to receive great academic and social experiences that prepare them for the workforce and to be a contributing member of society. We know that all children are welcome in our public schools and are encouraged to participate in the many programs and activities that are offered according to their needs, their skills, their skill levels, and their interests. And so, of course, we have many educational choices within the public school system across North Carolina, which sometimes people forget. Public schools have an enormous impact on local communities as well. They are the major employer we have found in most counties, and the K-12 pipeline ensures that workforce development for local community offerings, as well as for many opportunities in North Carolina. Public schools, especially in the rural areas, are often the heart and the hub of a community. Great public schools have always affected real estate values, in fact, wherever we are. I'm going to let Jeanne now, Jeanne will now speak about the state's role in funding public education.
Okay, thank you. Again, this is an overview. The North Carolina public school system is large. Each county has its own school system as well as many cities. The size of the school districts vary with many having less than 2,000 students up to some of the very large districts in urban areas. The K through 12 system includes both the traditional schools and the charter schools, with 1.5 million students attending. This requires many educators and staff, over 100,000 teachers. The student population is more diverse than North Carolina as a whole. For students, the distribution is 43% white, 24% Black, 22% Hispanic, and 4% Asian, while the North Carolina state demographics are 61% white and 11% Hispanic. These schools need sufficient and reliable funding, which they do not currently have. Next slide, please. North Carolina lags far behind other states in public funding. The Education Law Center compares school funding for states and the District of Columbia in an annual report called Making the Grade. For 2025, North Carolina is ranked at the bottom. It is 50th in per pupil funding, accounting for both state and local funds. North Carolina is the lowest state for funding effort. This is a measure of state and local funds as a percentage of the state wealth. North Carolina trails most states in teacher salaries, 39th for beginning teachers, 43rd for average teacher pay. Next slide, please. Being 50th in the nation for per pupil funding results in North Carolina students getting $5,660 less per student than the national average. We need to consider what our students are missing in terms of curriculum support, technology, counseling, mental health, and in the number of teachers. Please, next slide. Okay, let's look at the sources and responsibilities for funding. As Lucy reported, the North Carolina Constitution, it's the state's responsibility to provide this free education for North Carolina children. It has the responsibility for what is taught and for the number and qualifications for teachers, principals, and staff. Last school year, the state provided 62% of the K through 12 funding. The counties are responsible for facilities, new buildings, and maintaining existing ones. Counties also provide supplements to address the low state funding. Almost all also provide some level of teacher supplement. Overall, counties provide 26%, but the amount varies county to county. The federal government provides funding for students with special needs, low income, students with disabilities, rural English learners. In addition, it has funded school nutrition programs and Head Start. Next slide, please. However, there is inconsistent funding across the state, as seen by the per pupil funding, which varies by school district, and the Leandro court case, which was undertaken to correct funding disparities. We'll talk about each of these. Next slide. This is a graph for counties representing ODC. I'd like to show you, okay, the yellow line is the total per pupil funding in terms of thousands of dollars. The darker blue line is the amount provided by the state. The orange is the federal government, and the gray is the contribution by the county. These 4 school districts have a higher per pupil spending of over $15,000, but still you can see there's a $2,200 difference from Orange to Chapel Hill and Carrboro. Also note, you can see that the state funding is around $8,000 per student. There is in each of these counties significant local funding, and the contribution here for each of the counties is low, of the federal government is low. Next, I'd like us to look at some of the surrounding counties in the next slide. Okay, here we see some of the surrounding counties: Alamance, Lee, Persons, and Wake. You can drive 30 minutes across county lines, and you're going to find that student funding drops from the $15,000 range that we saw to around $12,000. We see also that the rural, lower wealth counties often contribute less local dollars, as you can see with the gray lines for Alamance, Lee, and Persons. The federal funding is a little bit higher than the ODC counties, but the state is remaining about the same. Next slide, please. Okay, I'd like to do a brief overview of Leandro, even though I know many of you are familiar with it. In 1994, 5 low-wealth counties sued the state for not receiving adequate funding for their schools, and they felt like they were not able to provide the needed education for their students. The North Carolina courts agreed. When it reached the North Carolina Supreme Court, repeatedly, it ruled that the state is not fulfilling its duty to provide a sound basic education for all North Carolina children. The Leandro Comprehensive Plan was developed to define what was needed and the cost. When the legislature did not act, the Supreme Court then ordered the state to release the funds in 2022. However, the General Assembly appealed, based on the premise that only the legislature controls funding and the courts cannot order the release of funds. A hearing was held in 2024. Now, 2 years later, there still is no ruling. The delay is unprecedented. So, what should be done with the Leandro case now stalled? One way is to mobilize our local elected officials for them to show support, to now advocate at the General Assembly through their legislative agenda and actions. Our role is to help them see that this is in the best interest of citizens in their county. Next slide, please. This slide shows the amount that ODC counties would receive if the Leandro plan was funded. You can see it both listed as K-12 and early education funding. The amounts do vary based on the number of students in the district, but it would be providing about a 30% increase to each school district. Okay, next slide, please. I'd like to now look at where the government gets the money to pay for public education. We'll start with the state. 96% of the state revenue is taxes. A small source for public education is the North Carolina Education Lottery. The federal government typically gets its funding through income, corporate, and excise taxes. The counties have 2 major sources of revenue: The larger one is property tax, but also sales tax. School boards have no independent source of revenue. They are dependent on state, federal, and county funding in North Carolina. They also have little flexibility on how the funds can be spent. Next slide, please. School funding comes from the state's general fund. The diagram on the left shows the sources. Individual income tax contributes 49%, sales and use tax is 32%, and corporate tax is at 7%. On the right, you can see where the money is spent. The largest category in the state budget is K through 12 education at 39%. When adding funding for community colleges and the North Carolina university system, 58% of the state budget goes to education. Therefore, legislators look carefully at these categories. Next slide, please. Now, let's look at the North Carolina Education Lottery. Most people are aware of the lottery and believe that it provides significant funds for public education. However, it only provides 3 to 4% of the total state education funding. Last year, the lottery had a sales of $6.6 billion, but only 16%, that is $1 billion, went toward education. The funds were divided up between pre-K, college programs, and K-12. And please note that none of the funding goes for K-12 student instruction or teacher salaries. The graph shows what was funded in 2024. The largest category is school construction, supporting low-wealth districts. The next category is school support staff, office staff, custodians, and substitute teachers. There's also money going to bus transportation, the North Carolina pre-K program, and college scholarships. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, one of the key questions that we're dealing with now is there going to be enough money to cover the needs in 2026? So Lucy and I are going to be covering these topics. The fact that we have no state budget, that there are state tax cuts going on. There is uncertainty in federal funding. There's a strain on local funding, and voucher dollars are now going to private schools. Next slide, please. North Carolina currently does not have a fiscal year 2026 budget. It should have started July 1st, 2025. However, there's no shutdown like there would be in the federal government because the state government continues using the previous budget. The budget has been stalled due to conflicting views by the Senate and House leadership. The stalemate is over. The schedule of tax cuts. Will there be enough revenue to cover funding needs in a growing state? The amount of raises for teachers and state staff when there's a high number of vacancies due to low pay. Also under discussion is the amount needed for Medicare, disaster reliefs, and due to the uncertainty of federal funding in healthcare, education, nutrition, and FEMA. North Carolina is the only state without a budget. And we can ask, why would the legislators not fulfill their budget responsibility? I've read about speculation that the legislators are now focused on the demands for re-election. We need to be asking all candidates about their position on the state budget and funding public education. Next slide. What is the impact of no budget on the schools? First, it affects, of course, teacher and staff pay, no raises. We also know that the teachers are dealing with increased health care costs, both in terms of their monthly contribution, but a teacher last evening was telling me about the significant jumps that she is facing with cost of medication and copay. Teachers are leaving North Carolina. Many are going to surrounding states, all which have higher salaries. And you can see this in the picture on the right, where North Carolina is 43rd, each Tennessee, South Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia, which are our surrounding states, are all higher. The other problem that the schools have is that if there are changes in student population, they have limited ability to make adjustments now. And no longer term projects can be initiated, which require funding. New contracts cannot be signed. Next one. One of the issues that we have of high concern is the tax policy, because tax policy at the state and local is closely linked to public education. In about 2023, the state legislators passed stepwise cuts in taxes, both for individual and corporate tax. This is portrayed in this graph. At the top, you can see the individual income tax. In 2025, it started at 4.25%. It's dropped this year to 3.99%, and the steps are continuing until it reaches 2.49%. Similar actions are happening at the corporate level. For 2025, we started at 2.25%, the lowest in the country. In 2026, it dropped to 2%, but will continue until it reaches zero in 2030. These changes in taxes, in fact, the one from 2025 to 2026 is estimated to result in a loss of $1 billion in state revenue. The education budgets rely heavily on the state income tax revenue. With these state reductions, the tax burden is going to be shifting more and more to the counties and to property tax. This results in less equitable tax structure and inadequate resources, putting an unfair economic burden on lower income families. I'm going to next turn it over to Lucy to be talking about federal funding and vouchers.
In 2025, as you probably know, there were threats to public school funding. There were millions of dollars in teacher training and mental health grants that were canceled, along with the USDA grants for local food for schools. Title funds were initially frozen, then released, and ESSER COVID relief funds were revoked, then released, and impact aid was delayed to some eligible districts. So will 2026 be another year of turbulence for North Carolina public schools, who are already suffering from no budget and from our state? Will chaos and uncertainty in federal funding negatively impact students? Because we know that it does. They are not receiving the kinds of services that they need. Will proposed funding again be canceled, delayed, or frozen? And then finally, how can schools plan for programs that benefit students when funding is uncertain and not properly allocated to needed programs? Those are just questions we need to find out. We want to protect the funding that we do have, and hopefully make sure that it will stay in our schools. Next slide. $12 billion in federal cuts in public education across the nation were proposed by this administration for 2026. So, I mean, how many of us have written letters or made calls to our U.S. representatives about the negative impacts that this will have on our public schools? I know that we did here in my county. Maybe the United States Congress was listening to our outcry, or maybe they are concerned about their own futures with elections. Regardless, though, several days ago, they rejected these education cuts and the structural changes that were going to take place. They instead passed a 2026 discretionary budget that maintains or slightly increases funding for core educational programs in public schools like Title I for low-income students, special education, their funding remains stable at this point. CTE, career technical education, will receive specific grants, and ESL, migrant support, and after-school programs are also being funded. However, the federal government has also proposed funding cuts for several school nutrition and related aid programs for this year, such as eliminating school meal equipment grants, the Farm to School program, and SNAP benefits. Of course, due to the tight constraints and the work requirements for SNAP, there will fewer students will be automatically enrolled. Their parents will need to re-enroll them in that program. Okay, next slide. Federal funds do matter. Federal funds count for $1 of every $5 of our education spending. When federal cuts happen, then states have to step in to supply education expenses that they maybe didn't count for. As we all know, the cuts based on DEI have affected many areas, including teacher recruitment and training, and of course, any number of other educational supports. The Education Law Project projected that North Carolina would lose $2 million on federal cuts this year, but we didn't. We're lucky right now. However, could they be delayed? Could they be frozen or eliminated? Our public schools need to know that these funds are protected now and in the future. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about opportunity scholarships. They are also called school vouchers, and they were launched in the 2014-15 school year, and they promoted school choice for low-income students who are attending failing public schools. It was meant to give them an educational opportunity that maybe they were not receiving in their public school. Early on, fewer families enrolled in the program than expected, and there were leftover funds each year, but our North Carolina legislators increased the appropriations for the voucher program anyway. The grant fund reserve was established to hold this money. In response to the low voucher demand in the beginning, money was awarded for publicity. In 2023, $1 million was appropriated to publicize the voucher program. The 24-25 school year had a record number of applicants. The eligibility requirements were expanded that year, and the universal voucher program was skyrocketing. All families were able to receive tax dollars to pay for a private school tuition. Students were no longer required to attend a public school first, and now the overwhelming majority of new voucher recipients come from families whose children are already attending public school, never attended public school, and those families can afford them. Scholarship amounts are given according to the income levels of the families. There are 4 tiers, and the amounts range from $3,500 to $7,700. A little bit more about schools who are eligible to receive vouchers. 75% of the 600 schools do have a religious background. Most are small schools. There are few requirements. None for academic rigor and the curriculum. Teachers do not have to be licensed, and only one person in a private school, such as the administrator, has to have a criminal background check. This is very different from public schools. There are no comparisons. Also, there are few student supports, such as transportation and lunch. State law requires private schools participating in the state voucher programs to follow the provisions of the Civil Rights Act that prohibit discrimination based on race, color, or natural origin. But otherwise, they do set their own enrollment requirements. They are not currently required to provide special education services. They're not legally prohibited from discriminating based on gender, academic ability, religion, or LGBTQ plus identification. And the funding of the Opportunity Scholarships continues to grow. It's grown significantly. For this year, $1 billion is allocated with $6.5 billion over the next decade. There are no requirements on how schools have to spend this money. There is little accountability physically or academically. So this makes it difficult for parents and for taxpayers to monitor and compare student achievement and school finances. It's impossible to know, is this money being well spent? This is money, we do know, that's needed for the chronically underfunded public schools who do not receive a guarantee that their funding will increase the next year. In fact, there is no guarantee that the money will exist at all for certain needed programs. Voucher funding has accelerated and public school funding has decelerated. It has been largely flat in recent budgets. So what's next? More expansion of our private schools, funding for homeschooled students. Will public schools be able to meet the needs of students whose parents can't afford private schools because the tuitions are rising, or because maybe they don't fit in? North Carolina's legislators have had their way with public funds. Despite their constitutional obligation to provide a uniform system of free public schools, they have been persistent in underfunding public schools and funding private education. The North Carolina General Assembly is supporting two different competing educational systems, and public education is struggling to keep up. We did put a link down here for Public Schools First. They have a new report about the vouchers. It's pretty extensive. It's really good too. Okay, next slide. Do want to talk a little bit about the Education Freedom Tax Credit. Let's see. Congress passed a federal school voucher bill at a cost of up to $51 billion a year. The Education Freedom Tax Credit redirects the federal dollars to private schools and leaves public schools across the country with fewer resources and deeper budget cuts. It allows families wealthy enough to donate to private schools to claim a dollar for dollar federal tax credit up to $1,700 a year to a scholarship granting organization. Also, families would be able to stack these funds on top of the existing state voucher programs. So two separate programs. The SGOs, or the scholarship granting organizations in North Carolina, could be any nonprofit organization, but it could include ones with a partisan agenda. So we don't know enough about that. In North Carolina, the state lawmakers passed the House Bill 87, Educational Choice for Children Act, which required the state to adopt the federal voucher program. It is up to the governors in every state as to whether or not they will adopt this program. However, Governor Stein vetoed it at this time because it did not give enough details about the program, and he didn't know for sure if it would adequately help public school families. So that's a decision that we're waiting to hear about. Okay, next slide. In summary, chronic underfunding of public schools is being further threatened by, as we have said, the state. There's much more competition for funds. There's no state budget. There are income tax reductions that are continuing to be proposed. And of course, the expanding school vouchers that we just talked about. At the federal level, it's uncertain. Education is not for sure the funding that will come. There's the possibility of dismantling the Department of Education, and there are additional health and nutrition cuts. Locally, there's a lot of pressure to address voids in state and federal funding, a lot more pressure to help education as well as the other services that are required in an area, in a local area. Okay, next slide. So what can you do? We'll talk a little bit about that quickly. Like Jeanne and I, we just try to stay informed about issues. We discuss it with each other and with our education committee and local and at the state level. We have a North Carolina Resolves, which we'll talk about, that you could help us with. And of course, you're invited to participate in the League of Women Voters education team on Wednesdays. And then, of course, there are many other pro-public education nonprofits that you could advocate with. Next slide. So this is a little picture of our North Carolina Community Resolves for fully funded public education. The North Carolina Community Resolves is a call to fully fund our public schools. It marks the 250th anniversary of the historic 1775 resolves, which brought the concerns of many communities to the British rulers. The North Carolina Community Resolves is a modern day call to action. It outlines the needs of our schools and the serious consequences of chronic underfunding. It emphasizes the issues we've been talking about tonight at all different levels. We are one of the lowest states, well, if not the lowest in our country when it comes to supporting our public schools. This petition urges immediate change in order to save them. It stresses that we need a good public education system that supports all students and teachers, not tax cuts or voucher expansion. It is an ask directed at our North Carolina legislators to fulfill their constitutional duty to fund a sound basic education for every child. Okay, next slide. The purpose of the resolves is twofold, really many reasons, but the two most important, the purpose of the resolves is to increase awareness by North Carolinians of the funding issues that we have here. We think also that the League of Women Voters has a role in informing the public. So please, you can help us ask by taking action for public school funding, by reading the resolves, signing them, and then sharing them with your family and your friends, other groups, organizations, and even at maybe some community events. We cannot allow North Carolina public schools to fall further behind. We currently have 2,800 names with a goal of 5,000 in the next few months. Another purpose is the advocacy focus directed to the North Carolina legislators that we said before and locally elected officials. In September, the League of Women Voters of North Carolina Education Committee took the resolves with the signatures we had at that time and delivered them to all 170 legislators in Raleigh. Well, we took them to their offices and their assistants. We really didn't see very many legislators. We are continuing to reach out to people from across North Carolina to show the legislators that there is a statewide support to fully fund our public schools. Several of our education committee members have presented the resolves at local school boards of education. So we want to also share this information and our resolves with other locally elected boards because our public schools are important to the health of our communities. Local officials can reach out to state legislators as well with this information. Okay, 32. The next slide, which is 32. There are many ways to advocate for public education, many advocacy opportunities at the state level. You can call, write postcards, letters to your delegates. You are their constituents. Attend town halls and legislator events and ask the candidates about their public education position. Attend advocacy days for voting rights and for public education. At the local level, we do feel that building working relationships with our local officials are important. Attend and speak at local school board and county commissioner meetings. At the federal level, calling or emailing your U.S. senator and congressional representatives can be helpful. Also, voting, very, very important. We want everyone to be an educated primary voter on March 3rd, and then, of course, on Election Day, November the 3rd. You might see too that we do have a link down here for our League of Women Voters education it's the League of Women Voters website, and that is directly goes to our public education information. Okay, next slide. Our North Carolina League of Women Voter Education Committee members have reached out to our town communities, to our own communities. We've had letter writing parties. We've asked people to call. Members of the league or other pro education groups have helped us. We have emailed and we have visited the North Carolina General Assembly. We have expressed concern about lacking a budget in these messages, and we have sent messages based on those in our resolves each month. And we've been doing this since October, and we're going to continue through the spring, and we'll gladly share any of these with you: postcards, messages, letters, and any information that we have that we can share with you, we will. Okay, next slide. We want to invite you to join us at our monthly meetings where we do share what's going on in our own communities and around North Carolina for the purpose of advocating for our local public schools. Finally, and the next slide, please. Please be an educated voter in the upcoming primaries and in the November election, and be a public education voter. Thank you. These slides will be, I saw in the comments, someone asked about if these slides would be available, and they will be after this. And thank you all. Jeanne and I really appreciate that you listen to us, and we are open for questions. Thank you.
Okay. Lucy and Jeanne, thank you so much. That was quite a presentation. Kind of depressing too.
It is very much.
We have a few questions out there. One was, why is the percentage amount from the education lottery going to education so low? If they have 16.6 billion and we only get one.
I think I can answer part of that. Most of the money actually goes, over 50% of the money goes to people who win the lottery. Then there is quite a bit of money that goes to the gas stations and retail places that have the lottery, who sell the lottery tickets. And then there's quite a bit go into marketing, in terms of ads. So when you're cutting all of that down, then there's only the leftover in terms of it. So that's why there is so little for public education.
Okay, thank you. Are private schools required to accommodate special needs students?
No, they are not. I mean, that is not one of their requirements to do that. Some do. And some of these things that we mentioned that they are not required to do, they may do. So I know someone who teaches part-time in a private school who retired from the public school, and she worked with special ed students. So but they're not required. Private schools are not required to take students based on their disability or any academic level.
Okay. In addition, let's see, somebody asked, or somebody commented, when students go to charters, districts lose the dollars and they are recouped if students return. Does the same thing happen with private schools? Does the money follow the student?
No, if a student starts at a private school, the money goes per semester to the private school. If a student goes back, it's not like a partial payment would be going back to the public school.
Yeah, interesting.
Yes.
Okay. And Dr. Jackson asked, are you available to present this presentation to our parent advisories?
Absolutely.
Yes, we would.
Okay.
If you would like for us to.
He said, we have a PAC meeting on February 19th. We can make room on the agenda. This would be an excellent content for parents and teacher advisory.
We do have a conflict on the 19th. We're going to giving a similar presentation at Dare County.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the slide for contact info?
Yeah, yes. Or
that would be one of the end slides.
yes.
Okay.
I think it's on our website too, our information about the meetings.
Okay. Okay. And you said the slide presentation would be available on the website.
Well, it's available to you all. I mean, yeah, I think we would have to get Jeanne, would we have to get Sarah to put that on there? I would.
Yeah, we had not thought about it, but we'll be
Yeah, we
glad to
haven't
put
thought
it on
about
the
it.
website.
I don't think we could do it, but we would ask someone to do it that
Yes,
could.
Okay,
yes.
okay. Um, Jennifer asked, there used to be an NC business organization that supported public education with lobbying and other types of support.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that still exists.
I don't know. I don't know in Carteret County where I am here. I don't know about North Carolina, just in general. Jean did talk about one, something in Mecklenburg County at one time, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think there are some of the business organizations. I'd like to get back to you with with their proper names with it. Um, in terms of it, I mean, so if I could respond with doing a little bit of homework on the names.
That
And
would
that
be
would be
great.
good. And that would be good for us too, to go to that information and implore them to help us. Yes.
Okay.
Be good.
Um, and somebody asked, can you put in the chat how to contact education group to get involved? Would they just go through you and Jean?
That would be great. Yes. You mean to come to our meetings?
I believe so.
Yes. That's fine. That would be great.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, Mary Kolek said money is not recouped from charter. I mistyped. Okay. Do private schools use the same testing assessments that public schools use?
Not necessarily, no. That's a big question there. There are some grades, and it's in the report from Public Schools First. There are some grades that do have the same test that public schools do, but that information is not made public. I think that's one of the things. That's the other thing, that they're not physically responsible in giving out these test results. Some tests, I mean, they do give a test, but not like the public schools and not in every grade. I would have to refer back to the report, but it's not nearly as stringent as public schools for sure. And it is, and I think the biggest thing is that sometimes the results are just not made public.
Okay. Okay. Um, those are all the questions that we have in the chat. A comment was made, despite having a strong economy, NC ranks below average for per capita income. This raises a red flag that many of our citizens are not prepared to take the high-paying jobs coming to our state. Also, the legislature is going to look at limiting how much local governments can raise property taxes. So there appears to be lots of opportunities for advocacy here.
Yes, lots. And it just shows you public education is not a high priority,
Yeah.
which is a shame,
It
which is not good
really
for
doesn't.
North Carolina in the long run.
Okay. Are there any other questions that oh, Deborah Mayer from Mebane?
No, I was just applauding the program. It's excellent and shocking.
Yeah.
Yes, it is shocking. Everything we read, we'll say, wow, we just can't believe that. And I mean, to me, like the publicity, I say this to Jean too, that, the publicity that the voucher program received, they spent so much money on that, and what was going on, what were they saying about public schools? I just feel like the public schools have had such a bad rap. And while they've been lifting up, private schools. And I don't think there is a lot of documentation at all to show that a child's academic performance or their ability increases by going to a private school. So it's a lot of money uh, that we're
Yeah.
giving out to private schools.
Okay. Well, if there are no additional questions, the presentation will be available on our YouTube channel. And you have the contact information. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to contact me, and I will make sure that the team gets the questions.
Oh, please. Yes, we
So,
like questions. It gives us an opportunity to find out more information that we can share. things we didn't know.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate the opportunity to have presented today. And again, we would like to be sharing this information wider. We believe that so many people in North Carolina just are not aware of how the schools are funded and what are the issues here. So one of our main goals is to try to increase awareness. And hopefully through awareness, people will be more involved and more supportive of public schools.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Ellen, did you have a
I have
comment?
one question, and that is related to the state Supreme Court. They never made a decision on the case that went to them. Has there been any pressure put by the league, your action team or other groups to try to force them to take this on and make a decision on the case?
I'm not sure how you put pressure on the Supreme Court. I did ask just last week one of the lawyers who was involved in, should we be writing letters to the North Carolina Supreme Court justices? And he said, I don't think it's going to make a difference. He said, ethically, you can do it, but he didn't think it was going to be making a difference. Part of where I was making the comments that we need to now try to use the influence that our local officials can do was a suggestion through this lawyer. He was basically concerned that the legal route through the courts being stalled wasn't going to be a positive thing. And if new lawsuits started, they might take another 30 years. So if we're trying to move something now, we really need to have everybody, and especially the organizations, the government agencies that have influence, to be involved. So I think we have our job out to be, again, emphasizing with our county commissioners and it's in their best interest, in the best interest for the people in the county, for this to happen and get them on board. So hopefully that's something that we can do locally and make a difference.
Yes.
But we need to be aware that the General Assembly has telegraphed that they may study in this upcoming session how to force counties to lower their property taxes.
Yes.
So, the schools could get squeezed from all sides.
Yes.
Very, very frightening time.
Yes.
There's primaries coming up, ladies. So, I think that your point, Jean and Lucy, were well taken in terms of presentations like this allow us to form questions for
Yes.
candidates and allow us to have conversations. There was a big thing on our next door today about voting party. How come the board candidates are not affiliated with the party? And there was a long conversation about, do you look at party or do you look at position and information? So I think things like this help us speak to that issue, and I would encourage us to do that. And one other thing is the ODC does have our own ed team, and we meet every month online on Zoom, first Monday of the month, I think, on 1 o'clock. So people can find more information about that on our website.
That's great.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Well, thank you all very much. It was an excellent, excellent presentation.
Thank you for having us. It was fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.